We are animals of language. All the words that were and all the words that will be lie sleeping inside our bodies. So I'm making this wire piece, and this is how I figured out to do it. I wrap the wire around here, and I go here. And then attach it to this wire up here. As you can tell, this takes quite a long time to do. I've been working on this one section for a week. So I figure that it will take something like 302 days of 8-hour days to finish this piece.
No.
Yeah. This piece is being made to cover a wall that is 60 feet long by 20 feet high. This wall is 9 feet. See? You see, those are done. The poem is by Salvador Espriu. It is, "You may laugh, but I feel within me suddenly strange voices of God and handles, dog's thirst, and memories, and the slow memories of message across a fragile bridge." Wait a minute.
A message of slow memories.
A message of slow memories. You may laugh, but I feel within me suddenly strange voices of God and handles, dog's thirst, and memory of slow message that disappears across a fragile bridge.
Slow memory.
Slow memory.
Message of slow
Memories.
Strange voices
Of God and
handles.
dog's thirst. When you're on the hunt, when you're out there looking at art, looking at music, going to a movie, meeting a new person, we're all on the hunt. We're hunters looking for something that will affect us, that will cause this surge of openness, looking for expansion and possibility. I've always been interested in making art that makes the viewer feel aware of a certain poignancy and tenderness, as well as a steeliness and edginess. I work in many different materials. I work in paper, wire, horsehair, photography, foil, bronze, performance, music.
Words heard, swallowed.
There's one reason why I can work in so many materials and so many different fields. And that pivot point is language. that I always need to have presence of language in the work. It can be hidden, it can be indecipherable, it can be secret, it can be large, but somewhere in the work there needs to be, for me, the presence of language, of poetry. That's my touchstone. I was an English major in college, but I was too speedy for poetry. I would be down at the end of a page before the words had had a chance to sink in. So I just dismissed poetry. Until my mother sent me a book of Emily Dickinson poems. I don't remember exactly which were the first words, but they went, it's when you eat something, the words were in my brain and down in my body. Words like, I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. Whoa, up came an image, or actually up came 10 images. Or I many times thought peace had come when peace was far away, which happens to be the first language that I used on a suit of clothing. And it felt very visionary to me, a little scary in a certain way, because it's as if the language was a catalyst, an invisible or medium between myself and creativity. Listen like to this. Renunciation is a piercing virtue, a putting out of eyes. And also, how ruthless are the gentle. Her language. How ruthless are the gentle. And the language of this poet is a giant mentor to my work. I need to go farther back to explain that connection to language and image in my work. I grew up in a small town in rural Maine and summered in the Adirondacks. As a young person, the other influence that language had on me was that my father was diagnosed as being paranoid schizophrenic. He had 2 children, a wife. He was a teacher, he taught, he was beloved. He was named Best Teacher of the Year for the whole state of Maine. A loving, intelligent, warm, and connecting human being. In addition to being nuts. Because he was schizophrenic, language was particularly freighted for him. There was a secret meaning, there was a surface meaning, and as a child growing up, I could see him hearing language in a double form. He could say certain words, like going, would have a certain kind of impact that would mean something completely different than I'm going to the store. Or the color red was one that had a special meaning for him. was actually a kind of warning sign to him. It's only been in recent years, really recent years, that I've actually been able to use the color red and to think of it as other than a warning sign. So I grew up really aware that words mean something, and they also mean something else. And they probably mean something else. And my mother also was my speech teacher in high school. She was teaching theater and drama and everything about the projected word. Another layer of language being not secret, but being out into the world to be heard by an audience.
So did Lesley elocute appropriately?
She did indeed. Those few sentences were pure gold. Absolutely, absolutely.
So you were her coach?
Lesley was in my class for 5 years.
I came to art late. I had a whole early life as a high school art teacher on Cape Cod. I went to grad school when I was 28 at the Maryland Institute. I thought I was a painter. I thought that was all you could do. And then I moved to New York. And at the age of 30 is when I started the path of art. Trying this, trying that. And then I've just emerged as a sculptor. What all this is, that these little figures are made out of. It's this black foil that's used in photography. But the thing is that it's black, and I wanted to use a material that was gritty and edgy, but also had some luminosity to it. So I found that if you scrubbed and scrubbed, you could actually get the black off. For example, so what myself and my sisters have been doing is we scrubbed, getting different shades of the foil. And then we've been cutting out the little figures that emanate out of the back of the figure here. Pulled from books and images from all over the world. And that I'll use over and over and over again in this piece to come. The figures will grow and they'll grow. 6 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, 11 feet, 15 feet. You can see in this model of the Neuberger Museum that this piece rush takes up an entire wall. 60 feet long and 20 feet high. In many ways, this piece is about the huge possibilities and resonances of lived life. But we've just started. We have another year to go. I work in my home. Here's my studio, here's my home, and I love working here because I'm surrounded by not only my pots and pans, but also the many objects that my husband and I have collected in our years of travel. These pieces have been so influential on my work. All the time. The wall of wire is called shimmer. You have to do at least 60 feet, 20 feet high. All of this emanating out of words. There's a metallic voluptuousness in weaving and letting these wires just come out of the words. We're walking in circles as if we're walking around a giant loom. We walk wire all day long with lots of volunteers and people helping me make it. And we do this day after day after day after day for months. I'm doing some bronzes, some fairly large bronzes for my upcoming show at George Adams Gallery in New York. Bronze and metal feel enduringly medieval. The pouring of the metal is about transformation and transubstantiation in the flesh. Okay, so where did Dennis go? So that's the one. Wicked little piece, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, do you want this cut off some so it goes down, or
Yeah,
is that okay?
I think I do want it to look like it's embedded in her, so
Okay.
it could go like there,
Okay.
and then we could see it.
Yep.
Thank you. That's great. Beautiful in the hair.
That looks good.
Yeah, I think that's better.
You put a little tack on it.
Okay, hold on.
Left side.
Yep.
Okay.
You sure? Oh, it's wild, Dennis. It's really wild. Come here and look. It's so weird.
Oh God.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Wonder can scare you to death, right?
Jesus.
Wow. That's powerful, little woman. You know, this is actually, I had an experience on my meditation retreat last year, and I did have this is an Emily Dickinson line, but I did experience this like kind of gripped, it's embarrassing to say, but it was gripped bliss for like 7 hours. So it has this lethal element to it, the experience. So I thought that's where that sculpture came from. So, oh no, you guys have done a beautiful job. And I think it's good that that side that comes out further is on the left side.
Okay.
You know, because we do tend to read from left to right. All right.
And this way.
Oh, Bobby, those look beautiful. ideas just appear inside me. I jot them down in a little notebook, and my ideas for work become like another phrase of Dickinson. Whole gulfs of red and fleets of red. The ideas come to me in bushels, in buckets, in downpours. Each time I go about collecting language, I read the entire book, whether it's Dickinson, Espriu, Neruda, Kafka, Slay, Heine, or Rilke. I turn the page, I read, I turn the page. The words lift up, come briefly into my intellectual mind, but they're recognized by some inner, more inchoate mind, like arid pleasure, or divide light. Banish air from air, divide light if you dare. That phrase will jump up at me. Dickinson also says, I heard as if I had no ear, until a vital word came all the way from life to me, and then I knew I heard. A vital word came all the way from life to me, and then I knew I heard. So that's the process for me. Great, because we were able to really figure out things like, we're going to have this huge wall of wire, have these individual pieces, and then here's the red girl, because the banners that come out of her body with the language of visions, out of her body. And then Emily, when I get done with this with Ed, we'll do it right away, so that we make sure that we attend to it. We can move these here so that we get a, actually what I'd like to do with Erin is to get I wanted to do this small woman sitting on a chair on fire. So hot, with ideas and inner life. And out of the back of her figure come language of visions. I think mainly we get these four and these edges very crisp. I think that will carry her. And then also from the side. And the language that's on these banners, these red silk banners, are quotes from people that I collected when I was doing a project in North Carolina called Tongues on Fire, Visions in Ecstasy, to describe individual visions and dreams they had. And so this is the language. The room is on fire. The air is like a drink. My insides melt into light. I hear a voice. She tells me her secrets. Words flood in. I lose myself. While I was traveling in Nepal, I one day went to a temple that had an architectural element that I had never seen before. There was a plated metal ribbon that started at the spire of the temple and ended just above the doorway, the entrance to the temple. And I asked them what this was and what it meant. And they said, oh, this is the tongue of God. You stand here, and whatever you say goes up this tongue of God, up past this earth, and up into the sky. And ever since then, I have had threads in my work. I have had elements that move from behind the mind, into the mind, and out into the space. And with this red girl, she especially, she has these red silk organza banners that are coming out of her back and that are going up into the sky in reminiscence of the tongue of God that started above the doorway and went up the roof and into the sky. Most of my figures are made with paper first, and it's because I have a sense of familiarity with the touch of paper. I can use it as the original sculpture and take that to a foundry, and it's then made into a bronze sculpture.
Great. We're putting letters. The thrill came slowly all over our head. Yeah, that's good.
In 1990, my husband got a job in New Delhi, India, and we lived there for 2 years. It had a very deep effect on my work. In India, because I lived there for almost 2 years, I was given the chance to see people touch Indian devotional sculptures over and over and over and over again. And one could only imagine that this had happened through the centuries, over and over and over again. The old, touched a million times statues, the tactility, the sense of time, fullness. I think on some level I try to get that in the work. This sense of obsessiveness is like a kind of devotion. Touching the work, touching the foil, twisting the wire over and over and over again. The repetition of labor is also soothing, and it marks time. It's a marking time kind of labor. Repetitively twist, bend, strew, over and over and over again gives the viewer time, gives you back time, because you know that it took a certain amount of time to do this, to do that, to do that. I want to do a white figure and a black figure, the two parentheses of light, lightness and darkness. I didn't know what material really to do them in, but I thought of silk organza, small squares of white and black. I want to give a sense of luminous opacity to these pieces, as if they were wax. And I'm finding out these pieces require about 14 layers of the silk organza to give the opacity and to also retain the luminosity. The poem on these two figures is by Emily Dickinson. Each figure bears half the poem. A single screw of flesh is coming out of one figure, is all that pins the soul is on another. A single screw of flesh is all that pins the soul, by Dickinson. I think that words are wings. Words lift us the way wings lift animals. This photo is of the light on the water in Maine in the winter. And growing up in Maine, near the ocean, the winter light is very silvery, and the light on the water, it's as if there's a layer of mercury that is floating on top of the water. So I wanted to try to work with this kind of light in the material. I chose to use wire and shimmer because it's got this electrical silver energy. I have done other pieces where there's a cascade of material coming out of a word. I've done wire words from which thread emits down to the floor. Hand-tied horsehair that springs out from the words, always from the words. And for this museum space, for the Neuberger, I wanted to use wire. There are the words of the poet Salvador Espriu, and they are so strong. So we made the words in wire. The words. And then out of the words comes all this wire, as if the word itself is secreting a kind of wire energy. But it's shimmering, you know, it's beautiful. Kind of electrical waterfall, reaching out into the world and descending down. You may laugh, but I feel within me, suddenly, strange voices of God and handles, dog's thirst, message of slow memories that disappear across a fragile bridge. The feet could be very akimbo. That's kind of cool. And this figure, like all my figures, starts out as a paper figure. And she had to have a dress because I wanted her to be female. And she had to be upside down because I wanted her to be falling, flying. As she was emerging, she didn't seem to really need arms. She just seemed to need just the barest amount of what she has there. Legs, a skirt, a head, and her tongue out there, impudent, but licking the floor. This small figure came from seeing a piece of the choreographer Pina Bausch many, many years ago. She had an interlude where one dancer was licking the floor. And I loved the mix of self-victimization, service, and sheer flipness about licking the floor. Our current day is layered with images of fashion, contemporary music, and war. I wanted to make a dress of armor that was about sorrow and style and lamentation. This year I had a more personal connection to war than reading the newspaper or listening to the radio. My husband, who is a filmmaker, spent a few months living in Iraq with the soldiers. So I had a very personal connection to violence and death and apprehension. I wanted to make a dress, clothing, that was in a style of fashion with a big neck, with a ruff, that would look like style, but would also look like an explosion. The skeletons on the dress are from Tibetan imagery of skeletons and Mexican Day of the Dead. Death reminds us of life. And the reminder of death helps us to lead life in a more intense way. The title is embedded into the neck. Dress of war and sorrow. When I was 14 years old, I had a vision. I got up and was getting dressed to go to school, and the morning sky was against the dark leaves of the oak trees, black against the sky. My bedroom world faded, and this other world came up from the leaves against the sky. This huge, dark universe, and inside threads and mapping of light. I heard words like sorrow, ravaging war. I felt such deep sorrow and yet also understanding. This is the world and it's all right. Also feelings of what I now know to be utter joy, bliss. In my work, I like to address darkness, blackness, and lightness, the breadth of our emotional life. I feel that the real materials of my work are not just wire, fabric, and bronze and paper. The real materials of my work are fierceness, gentleness, hope, sorrow, hate. These are the materials really that I work with. The words on this bronze are how ruthless are the gentle. And those edges of the words seem somewhat lethal, and yet they are radiating out like a kind of metallic halo. And the dress is about introspection, about interior life. The language is from Rilke, the poet, and it says, what is inwardness? So there's what is on the arm. There's a big W that's cut out of her chest. It's as if the letter is a lung, as if she breathes in through this letter that's on her chest, and she breathes out through the letters that are on the skirt. The process of inwardness is the process of bringing in and bringing out, bringing in and bringing out. It's about interiority. Sometimes I'll get the image, but I don't have the language. And it's not rational, it's more like, what's the fit? Like with Rush, I didn't have language for that exploding universe of conflicting forces out this guy's back. The end of 7 months. Finally, the language for that piece is the tremendous world I have in my head, which is what we all work with all the time, right? The tremendous world I have in my head, but how free myself and free it without being torn to pieces. Then retain it in me or bury it. That indeed is why I am here. That is quite clear to me. This would be Kafka. Dickinson said, "To be alive is power, existence in itself, without a further function, omnipotence, enough." To be alive is power, existence in itself, without a further function, omnipotence, enough. Omnipotence, enough. Between omnipotence and enough, that's the bracket. It's where we all live.